It's October 7th. I was last talking about how I was, just last night, about how I was shifted from one place to another. And today I did change my clothes, but I'm wearing the same, I'm just wearing this hood today instead of my regular scarf. I probably want to talk about some of the different places that I was moved to, or the positions that I was forced into while I was in Wenatchee. And that in combination with what was happening with my attempt to get the psychological evaluation that the judge had ordered I had to have done after he hung up on me in a hearing. So he ruined the reputation of justice. And then he did say I could have that psychological evaluation done on the East Coast. And I tried very hard to make that happen over there. Finally, when I was with Alvaro, there was a woman on the East Coast who began setting aside time, and she made an appointment for me to have my evaluation there on the East Coast. The idea was that I would fly out, even if I was in Wenatchee, I could still fly out for that appointment and then come back over here. At that time, because Alvaro was working for the United States, and because all of a sudden the United States had suspended their hostility to at least the degree of trying to turn things around for me, or at least what appeared to be an attempt to turn things around, she scheduled a 14-day psychological evaluation. And it was going to be an extensive evaluation which would determine on a day-to-day basis how I acted, what my moods were like, did I have, was I losing, having psychotic breaks, for example, because I was being accused of having of being basically insane. That's what I was accused of by Washington State and Washington State officials. They lied about me, and they tried to stick me with a diagnosis of paranoid schizophrenia, but nobody had diagnosed me, and all of my counselors had cleared me of having any kind of severe personality or mental disorder, like chemical imbalance or personality disorder. I still was being slandered as having the worst possible kind of mental illness. And basically where people start, I was not only being accused of having the worst possible mental illness, the one which would discredit my claims of being tortured and being repeatedly raped by federal employees. Trying to say that I was paranoid and delusional, and I had an inept perception and self-awareness, that I was rambling delusionally, and that later when people started throwing in psychotic accusations, for example, Michael Holt claiming that, the CIA Nigerian woman claiming that I held a knife against her when I didn't. And if I'm saying I didn't, either I'm lying or I am mentally ill. And then Michael Holt redoubled that false claim by alleging I had held a knife against her, which I never did. And since the police and authorities sided with her and were friends with her and her brother, who owned one of the largest bars in the area that the police, the police worked alongside with a lot of the time. When she then accused me of holding that knife, she basically was accusing me of being psychotic. And she did put the word psychotic into her request for a restraining order against me to keep me out of the house because she had illegally locked me out. These were horrific accusations. Basically, when I went to the East Coast and I was working in the public eye, they stopped slandering me. Washington State could no longer attack me with the same claims when everybody on the East Coast could see that they were lying. I'm sure I know that I had enemies on the East Coast who tried to cause trouble, but there were so many people from so many different countries. Even if they didn't like me, they could all see for themselves that I was not rambling, delusional, paranoid, schizophrenic, and psychotic, and all of these other things. And the people on the East Coast over there also knew what kinds of technology would be used to create the torture against me and my son, and the kinds of symptoms that I was describing matched up with that. They are, they're highly intelligent people. It's not like the United States has the only brains in the world. I mean, there are people all over the world who have knowledge of technology and technological warfare and research and hate crimes. And they know what the effects are to people as well. So I got a little bit of protection initially, just because of my exposure, but by putting myself out there into the public eye to disprove these crazy claims that were being made against me when I was basically isolated in Wenatchee. As long as I was in Wenatchee and with people all around telling everyone and writing up false documentation about me, I was not going to find a way to escape those false allegations. So it was very good, and especially initially, that I went to the East Coast, because I was able to distance myself from false allegations. It wasn't like I started popping pills or I had a change of mind or, any of these serious mental health disorders. They don't just come and go like that. I mean, either you have a very serious mental illness or you don't. And being put into more distress and pressure or unstable situations, that's going to bring out the worst of any kind of disorder. So when I was leaving my place in Birch Bay to go to the East Coast, if I did have a mental health disorder, that should have brought out the worst of it, because that was instability again, not knowing how I'm going to get over there, but trying to do the best that I could, and very stressful, having to leave the state of Washington, that kind of thing. And it didn't. And when I went to Canada with my son, as I said, we were still tortured in Canada. But I had removed both myself and my son from a location where we were targeted with more than one form of technology. And I don't know if possibly the reason some of that technology was no longer being used against us in Canada was simply because you had to have, you couldn't isolate someone to do all of the things that they were doing. I mean, for example, there are many things that they can pinpoint and find. I mean, even as crazy as it sounds, they have technology in seriously outer space. Satellite technology that can pinpoint the side of your nose, and if they want to target your nose with a laser of some kind, they are able to get that narrowly focused to a specific part of your body and do that. And it seems really crazy, but if you think about it, just from, I'm not a scientist, and probably most people who might see this are also not scientists. But if you think about, since we all share common knowledge and what the media tells us, and there's a whole lot that we all know that the media does not tell us, and that we're not educated about. But if you think about just the small amount that we can all share and agree on, and say, yes, we have heard enough about this to know that it's true, is, for example, satellite technology that is in space that can pinpoint hotspots, quote-unquote hotspots, on the Earth, and they can even get close enough where they can see, like maps, road maps. You can use satellite technology to find specific objects on a road. And since we have seen a little bit of military footage that shows that kind of a capability, I would just say, try to imagine that, with the years, with the kinds of scientific advancements that we've had, it's not that many more steps ahead to then pinpoint the side of a person's nose by satellite technology. I mean, satellite technology can find a rock in the road and blow it up. And satellite technology can also find human beings very easily. So when I broach onto the topic of satellite technology and outer space, and here I am wearing this probably not the best head attire for what I'm talking about, because I feel like I'm looking like a weird astronaut right now, but I'm just saying, I'm trying to ease whoever has some doubts, ease you into believing me, and being able to accept that what I say is not quite as crazy and outlandish and impossible as it first sounds, or seems to be. So what I am trying to define is technology that can get very narrowly focused on a very small spot. And then there are also different forms of technology that cannot do that, that are used over a wider radius of area. So there are other kinds of technology, for example, where no, they're not going to be able to just focus on your nose, a spot on your nose for something. But, and really that maybe that specific form of technology wouldn't even be utilized in that way. It would have no effect if they could just focus on the side of your nose. But there are other kinds of technology where it might include covering an entire radius of an entire house, or maybe a couple of acres, 2 acres of property. And within those 2 acres of property, there are forms of technology that can be used to create severe and excruciating pain and disability to human beings. So if you have, let's say it's me and my son in our house, when it's just me and my son on 30 acres of property or so, with quite a lot of distance in between our neighbors that also have farmland in that area. And then you end up living with other people. So for example, me and my son just end up living with the other individuals, or other individuals come to live with us. If there are other people that are living with me and my son in the house, and we're all in that same radius that is a potential target, sometimes then the U.S. will postpone and has held off doing the same thing because they don't want to do it to all of us. Because for one thing, I think the idea of isolation is that you just make a couple people sound crazy, because if you make a whole bunch of people sound crazy and they all have the same complaint, it's harder to discredit